Welcome back to the Redeem Podcast. If you have not subscribed to the Redeem newsletter, then hit pause real quick, go to laurenburns.net and subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any of the amazing stories, scripture verses, tips, and tricks that will land straight in your inbox every other week. Now, today on the Redeem Podcast, I'm honored to welcome New York Times best-selling author Melanie Shankle. Many of you know Melanie for her wit, wisdom, and authentic way of sharing life and faith. In her newest book, Here Be Dragons, Melanie doesn't shy away from the hard places, especially the challenges in raising a child that's going through hardships in high school, and what it looks like to walk through fear, conflict, and uncertainty while clinging to God's grace. This book is a powerful reminder that the unknown, the dragons in our lives, can feel overwhelming, but they can also be the very place where God shapes us most deeply. Today, we'll talk about how Melanie found strength in her own dragons, the wisdom she offers navigating those same uncharted waters. Have you ever found yourself struggling through life's unexpected twists, wondering, this isn't what I planned or hoped for? If so, you're not alone. Life rarely goes as expected, even when we think we've mapped it all out. Psalms 107:2, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Welcome to the Redeem Podcast, a place of encouragement and hope. Through honest conversations and powerful interviews, we'll explore incredible stories of transformation and resilience, even in the face of the impossible. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and I'm so glad. Please help me welcome to the Redeem Podcast, Melanie Shankle. Melanie's the host of Big Boo podcast and the Big Mama blog in 2006. Is that
I
correct,
did.
Melanie?
Yeah, that's correct. A
And I
lifetime
was,
ago.
hey, no, not long because we are so young.
Yes.
Melanie's book, when I first picked it up, is a beautiful cover. I'm sure you hear that all of the time.
Mhm.
Here Be Dragon is a lot. There's a lot to it. It is not just for the mom that has girls. I have two boys, and I can totally relate to everything in these pages. You dive into your own story of your childhood wounds with your mother. And I want to start by reading one of the passages in your book. God completely heal you is to fully grieve as you surrender the hope you had that things could be different and trust that He will redeem what you've been through in ways you can't see at the time. He will truly give us beauty for the ashes of things in our lives that have burned down, like totally burned down.
Mhm.
And so Melanie's going to open up and share with us a little bit of what this book is about, where God sort of took her as she was writing this book, and about her own childhood wounds with her mother.
Yeah. Lauren, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you today. Here Be Dragons is my story. I always laugh. I'm like, the subtitle is Treading the Deep Waters of Motherhood, Mean Girls, and Generational Trauma. So I'm like, just a lighthearted read, just a feel good read. But it really began what I thought I was going to write. I started writing this book during my daughter's sophomore year of college, and I thought it was going to be kind of navigating her high school years and what we went through. And she dealt with mean girls and high school drama and all the things that so many girls are dealing with. Because as I traveled around and spoke, and anytime I talked about it, other moms would come up and say, my daughter is going through this. She has gone through this. I've been through this. And so I thought, well, we have a mean girl epidemic. And I was going to write a book about that. But then as I started thinking about this book and processing it, was actually Sophie Hudson, who's my podcast partner. She is an English teacher, was an English teacher in her former life, and was a girls counselor at the Christian school where she worked in Birmingham. And she said, I've watched so many moms and daughters navigate this mean girl thing in an unhealthy way. And she said, and I think a huge part of your story is how you had to become emotionally healthy from the way you were raised with your mom, because she knew that story, for you to be able to parent Caroline in an effective way. And she said, I think those two stories are tied together. And when she said it, you know how somebody says something that you know is so true and it's kind of scares you? Like I almost like had to put my head down between my knees and like hyperventilate because I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I see how this is all going to happen or how this all ties together and what generational trauma looks like and generational dysfunction and how we have to heal from that to be able to parent and be the people that God calls us to be. And I still didn't know how I was going to tell that story because at the time that I signed this book contract, my mom was still living. And spoiler alert for the book, but I found out about 2 months later, my sister let me know that my mom had been diagnosed with a really aggressive form of cancer. And so my mom ended up passing away, which gave me the freedom to tell this story that I always knew I wouldn't be able to tell. I used to joke and say the title of this book was going to be Now That Everybody Is Dead. You know, like I needed everybody to die before I
Yeah.
could tell the real story. And so God in his timing, I was like, okay, it's never been more clear that this is the time that he wants me to tell this story.
And I love that, Melanie, because you're like, do I change their name? I can't change their name because people know me. And
Yeah.
God's like, if you just trust me, I know
Mm-hmm.
the big picture, but you don't. So you had to step out in faith and be like, I'm going to go down this road. I'm going to write this without knowing what that was going to look like with your mom.
Yeah.
And you, I'm sure you feel this way. It's like, that's another way God's showing you you are doing the right thing. My timing is perfect. Just keep following me.
That's it.
Melanie, what was, reading through your book as a child, and you talk about this, you as a child don't know anything different but the way your mom was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is it normal? Are these conversations normal? The way she treated you normal? And so it's not until your college years that you started realizing, oh, this isn't normal. And the way she treated you and the things that y'all went through that that affected your identity of who you were. So talk
Yeah.
a little bit about what was it like? Your parents were married, they went through a divorce. What was that like with you and your sister?
You know, my sister was so young. I was 8, she was 4. And I just, when you're that age, this is what I say about childhood. I think something has to be really wrong for you to know something's not right as a
Mhm.
child. Like, I think things have to be really off. And that was not the case for me because we had a very normal family. I mean, my dad worked a normal job and my mom was home. She was the PTO president. So it's like we lived what appeared to be this kind of idyllic storybook life. And so you don't start to realize all the things that are going on. Now, I knew after the divorce, things got increasingly chaotic because I think while my dad was still living at home, it masked a lot of what was going on with my mom. I think the divorce was, I think she had started to unravel, but I think it was the continuing of her unraveling. I think that's when her prescription drug use got worse. I think her coping skills became where she stayed in bed all day. But I really did just think as a kid, I was like, well, I guess moms, that's what they do. They just stay in bed all day.
Mhm.
You don't know because you're not exposed to a lot of other stuff. And then it was when I got to college, which I think is just a time in your life where you start to pay more attention. I mean, you go home with friends. I think you have those late night talks with your roommates about your families and things. And I started to realize, like, oh, I don't think that what I grew up in was normal. And I started to look at the way other mothers and daughters functioned and the way their relationship was. And I really began to realize that's not the relationship I've had with my mom.
One thing I noticed in your writing is you call your dad dad in the book, but when you talk about your mom, you use her first name quite a bit. And I do the same thing because, well, it's a totally different story, but I have my own father wounds. And so calling him dad was actually painful for me.
Yeah.
Um, so why is it that you think that you always call your mom by her name instead of mom?
Because I think once that shift started to happen, and especially as I got into my adulthood, I was like, she's not a safe person for me.
Yeah.
And you think a mom should be a safe person, a
Mhm.
dad should be a safe person. I mean, they're your caregivers. And it's interesting because there are different levels of generational trauma and things that people have gone through. And even when I was writing my story, I thought, there was this little voice that kept saying, well, people have gone through far worse than this. And it's true. People have
Mhm.
gone through far worse things than anything I experienced. You went through something traumatic in your childhood, but I think we have to recognize that, like, if there's any way that a parent made you have to carry an emotional burden that was not yours as a child to carry, that creates trauma. And that
Mm-hmm.
can look different ways. And so for me, that's what my mom did. And so she just, in my mind, kind of became Suzanne. It put her at a distance from me because a mom should be safe. And she just got increasingly not safe for me.
Mm-hmm. You write about her vanity, and I
Mm-hmm.
think you talk about even that was her mom as well, and how
Mm-hmm.
she put that on you. Even going dress shopping for your wedding day, she like
Mm-hmm.
always turned situations around.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
She wanted me to be something for her that I was never intended to be. And it was this weird thing because she wanted me to like the same things she liked, and she wanted me to value the same things she valued. But also, there was always this weird competition, jealousy, insecurity thing that came in too. So that wasn't really the answer either. But it was almost just like, I think, the wedding dress thing, because I was so happy. And now that I have a daughter, when you really appreciate, you're like, well, what could be more joyous than like shopping with your daughter for her wedding dress, and she's met the person that she wants to marry, and there's all this excitement in this moment. And for her, it just became, it's almost like she couldn't stand to see me happy. And so she began to undermine that by, well, I don't really like that dress. I don't like the dress that you chose. I had that moment where I was like, this is the dress, like, this is the one I want. And they put on the veil, and I was like, this is it. This is everything I envisioned. And she's like, well, it's really plain. It's not what I wanted. And continued that. I mean, she never relented on that. And so it was just those kind of things where you're like, you want your mom to say, I mean, your mom should be the voice that
Yes.
is saying, you're so beautiful. You're so wonderful. My daughter, Caroline, will even laugh because she's like, Mom, you kind of affirm me too much. Like, stop. It's almost like a knee jerk where it's like, this is your child. And that's how you should feel about them, is that, your mom should think you're the greatest person in the world, even if everybody else doesn't.
And you talk about your dad took the high road, and there is in your book, I underline how beautiful that you wrote this about how when they got divorced and your dad remarried, your
Mm-hmm.
mom painted this different picture of your father, and it seemed
Yeah,
like it put a wedge a little bit
it did.
between you. And then when you got married to your husband with fresh eyes,
Mm-hmm.
your husband Perry spoke into that relationship whenever he met your dad and your stepmom.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think your dad is what your mom may have said that he is.
Yeah. I think sometimes, isn't that what it takes? Like, you need a fresh set of eyes, because I think we can get so caught up in our own narrative or what we've been told, and we just see things a certain way. And I think God in his graciousness, like, I look and think, that truth didn't come to me until I was at an age where I was old enough to process it. Because I almost think, what if I had, because I always suspected growing up, the way my mom vilified my dad, it just didn't line up. It didn't line up with who he was. It didn't line up with the way he treated us. She very much wanted to paint him as a dad who had kind of abandoned his kids and chosen something else. But I was like, but he calls us every single night, and I had other friends who had divorced parents who never saw their dad. So I thought, this doesn't go into this picture of this absentee father who just ran off with another woman to have a new life, because they were always very present and around. And so it was almost like when Perry said it with clarity, I was like, he put voice to something that I had always suspected. And I knew as soon as he said it, and it led to me having an in-depth discussion with my dad about everything. But almost as soon as Perry said it, I knew, I was like, you're right. Like, it wasn't like, no, I don't think you understand, or you aren't seeing the whole. It was immediately like, oh, he's right. And I know he's right. And now that's why I have to have this conversation with my dad, because I almost needed to understand why my dad had never tried to clear his name or never fought back. And some of that's because that's his personality. That's just not who he is. But I think he also knew that wasn't the time to do it. And I think he is an example of, sometimes we have to wait and know that the truth of a situation is going to come to the surface. That's where God tells us to be still and know, and that he's going to fight for you. Because I think our instinct is we want to fight back, and we want to clear our name, and we want justice immediately. And I think sometimes God is saying, just let this play out and trust me that the truth will come to the surface.
You talk about when you have a daughter, when you have a child, you
Hmm.
want to be a different type of mom.
Yeah.
How did you become a mom and carry the things that you went through with your own mother? What did you do different, Melanie?
I think I did it very intentionally. I think because of what I went through and because of my relationship with my mother, from the time I found out that I was expecting a daughter, and I was like, oh, I am going to be the mother to a daughter. And that just carried a weight that I think it would have been different if I had had a son, because it just felt like I'm going to get the chance to redeem this in a way and to make this into what I wish I had had. So I think I did it and by that time in my life, because it was in college that I became serious about my faith and that Christ became real to me. And so I had begun to heal. I'd begun the healing journey. And so by the time I got pregnant with Caroline at, 31 years old, I had been married for 6 years. I was pretty healthy emotionally and spiritually at that point. And Perry and I both knew we were very much going to break any generational cycles, and we were going to raise her differently. And we wanted a child who was going to be exactly what God created her to be. We did that with a lot of prayer and with a lot of intention. And our pastor said this years ago, and I've kind of taken it on, where it's like, we may have not done it perfectly, but we did it faithfully. I think that's really the key to parenting is all of
Mhm.
us are going to screw it up, and our kids will probably all sometimes in adulthood they could give us a list of here are some things you did wrong. And that's okay. I mean, that's parenting. We're flawed people raising flawed people. And it's funny because now Caroline's about to be 22 and we've gone back and been like, okay, here are some things that we screwed up, but our heart was in the right place. I think there's something about an intentionality and just saying, God, I trust you with this child. I trust what you're doing in her life. And we are going to hand her to you over and over and over again, that she's yours, not ours. That was always our intention and what we did our best to do as we raised her.
And it's hard. And my boys,
Oh,
I'm about to have one go into high school. He's going to be in eighth
yeah.
grade. And so
Mhm.
we just got out of the middle school years. And you talk about, we're all worried about middle school being horrible. And that's what I've always thought too.
Yeah.
But we don't know what's around the corner. And how do we
No.
navigate all of this stuff?
Mhm.
I mean, social
Mhm.
media and sports and club sports and the
Yeah.
busyness, it's a lot to manage. My friend Allison got me hooked on Imogene Skincare's Glow Vitamin C Skin Serum, and now I can't imagine my morning routine without it. It's lightweight, smells amazing, and makes my skin look fresh and bright all day. I've noticed such a difference in my skin's texture and glow since I started using it. If you've been wanting to treat your skin to something nourishing and effective, this is the one I would recommend. Use the discount code Lauren10 to get a discount anytime you order from this amazing company. I will put it in the show notes so you can easily find it. Caroline went through some hard things in those years, and you and Perry had to figure out how to help her navigate through it.
Yeah, we kind of made it through the junior high years and those were good. And so in that moment, you kind of think we're good. And then she got to her sophomore year of high school. It was just one of those things like you go back and you try to figure out like what happened, where did this all go wrong? But she had had a group of girlfriends and um, things just got increasingly toxic where it was just this mean girl. I mean, all the stuff where one girl says this and another girl says this. And then there's group texts where they're talking about her. Caroline was on a group text she wasn't supposed to be on. And it just kept escalating and they wouldn't leave her alone. Like they didn't want to talk about it. She kept saying, can we talk this out? What happened? As a mom, I kept going because I never wanted to be the mom that was like, well, my kid would
Yep.
never, I'm sure that's your child. That's not my child. You're trying to like get a gauge of like, did you do something? Like, have you instigated this? Is it something that's whatever? And she was like, no, I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to clear it up. And finally, there was one text that a girl sent, and I talk about it in the book, that was so toxic and outrageous where she just basically said, I will tell whatever lies I have to tell about you. I will blow up your reputation. I will destroy your life. It was so malicious and made so clear what was going on that I thought, man, this isn't just normal mean girl stuff. But even trying to help her navigate that, because you're wanting to teach your kid how to stand on their own 2 feet and how to fight back, because life is going to be full of mean people and unfair situations. And so you don't want to coddle them, but it's like figuring out, like, at what point, when do you step in? And when I started to watch Caroline, where she dreaded going to school and she would get home and she was crying every day, and it just felt like nonstop. There was so much prayer that went into, like, God, how do we handle this? And I felt like he kept saying, and I would, Perry and I late at night would be like, do we pull her out of school? Do we move her to another school? What do we do? God just kept saying, just trust me, just trust me. And I tell the story in the book that a day came when, she is so much more Perry's personality, my husband, and just strong and not afraid to speak her mind. And I kept saying, you just need to be kind, just be kind. And it kind of had gotten to a point where she came home one day and Perry said, no, you're done. Like, he said, they are not backing down. This is war. And he said, you tell them to leave you alone. And if they don't, then whatever. And he was like, and if it gets violent, he said, if it gets physical, punch him in the mouth and I'll meet you in the office. And she kind of needed to hear that, and I think that's sometimes the discernment and the wisdom and why we need to pray so much as parents, because, you've got 2 kids, and I'm sure your 2 boys handle things completely different from each other. So it's like, you so need God's wisdom on how you parent different situations, because you don't, those are the dragons. You never know what's around the corner in your child's life.
Oh yeah. And Melanie, I'm right there with you, because my first instinct, well, the Bible says to be kind and be nice and show love and be gracious. And I've had to do that same thing. And same thing, like, I don't want to be texting the parent, like, this is your battle to figure out. But we've had to do the same thing. And sometimes going to the parent too. And it is just hard to know what's the best thing. And like you said, the different personalities, the different situations, but letting your kids know that you're going to be there for them no matter what, and you're going to have their back no matter what. How did that help Caroline get out of that season? Or was it not until really she left college?
It got better once she stood up, like once she kind of realized she could fight back and she stood her ground. And it ended with a confrontation where she said, this is it. We're not doing this anymore. And at that point, the school administration got involved and basically said they had to stay away from her and they couldn't have contact. And Caroline was good about, where I was like, you need to block them. You need to block their text. You need to block them on Snapchat. You need to not give them access to you. And that's one thing, like, if your kid is going through something like that, shut it down. And that's the difference for you and I going to high school. It's like somebody may be mean to us in the hall, but they didn't have constant 24-hour access to us. And that's a different thing that our kids are facing, where it's like, just to get a barrage of text and ugly things being said about you and all of that. It's okay as parents to step in and say, you know what, we're going to take some time away from social media right now. Maybe we get a flip phone for a while, and they're going to think you're the meanest person ever. But if that's what you need to do to protect them, I think there's wisdom in that. So at that point, things did get better. But I would say for her, high school it was fine. She got through it, and she's pretty emotionally resilient. But she never really found her people or her group. It was not a great season. And it was funny because even when she was getting ready to go to college, we'd had COVID hit the end of her junior year. And so her senior year was weird because, like, you kind of had the option of going to school online or in person. And so she kind of opted mainly, like, I'm just going to go online, not because of COVID, but just because she was like, I can. We were like, we're fine with it. At this point, it feels stupid because at that point she was going to school and you had teachers putting shower curtains in between them and the students. And I was like, this all feels real stupid. So at that point, she kind of opted. So by the time she left for college, it was almost like, people were like, oh, the empty nester thing. And she's my only child. But I was like, no, she needs to go. Like, it is time for her to go live her life and to find her friends and to find some joy, because life here, she's just outgrown where she is. And it was such a clear picture of God having more for her. And, and not that she just graduated from college a couple of weeks ago, and not that it's been all a bed of roses, because life comes with other challenges and there have been other hard things and other struggles. But I have seen where what she went through in high school, and she would say it, how what she went through in high school gave her the strength and the wisdom to go through things that she's had to go through since then. And it gave her a trust, and it gave her own faith in God and the way he can carry you through. And those are lessons that you continue to need for the rest of your life.
You know all about that, the
Yeah,
things you went through as a child.
that's it.
When you go through the fire, it teaches you so much, especially if
Mhm.
you know lean into God and you see God show up and you have
Yep.
empathy and compassion and understanding for other people. And Caroline is writing a book, a devotional, The Lion, The Lion and the
The Lion
Bear.
and the Bear. The Lion and the
And
Bear,
so
a 100-day guide, so it's a devotional that she's written.
so even at that, I mean, this
Yeah.
she is a young woman just starting her career,
Mhm.
and God's already given her these stories to be able to put in a book and to share with others.
Yeah.
Melanie, talk to us about the boundaries that you finally came to a point with your own mom that you had to have boundaries with your mom, which is not
Mhm.
easy. We talked about this earlier. I have boundaries with my father, totally different situation because he's not really in my life. But sometimes when
Yeah.
people put boundaries up, they think, is that disrespectful? Is it, the
Mhm.
Bible talks about the 10 commandments to honor your father and mother. Well, am I honoring them if I cut them out of my life or however
Mhm.
you want to say it?
Yeah.
So talk to us about how did you put those boundaries up and what did that look like?
I think people get a misunderstanding of boundaries because I think God gave us the ability to have boundaries
Mhm.
with people. And I think when there are unhealthy situations or people in your life, it's okay to say, I'm going to give you less access to me to protect your peace. I think you need to do it prayerfully. I think you need to do it. I was very intentional. For me, it started where I was just going to try to draw like these small boundaries. Like, I don't want you staying in my home. I'm not going to give you access alone with my child. But the thing is, and this is in every book on boundaries that you read, is the people in your life that you have to set boundaries with are always going to be the people who push the hardest against those boundaries, because that's why you need boundaries with them in the first place. In normal friendships and relationships, you usually don't have to set down a list of ground rules of access or the way they're going to be able to treat you or whatever. My mom kept pushing against those boundaries. And when it finally came to the time where I thought the only way for me to be healthy is to cut her out of my life in that relationship. I did it, and this is what I would tell anybody. I did it very prayerfully. I didn't do it out of spite. It wasn't a knee jerk reaction to a situation, because there had been plenty of things over the years that made me want to, in your humanness, be like, well, I'll show you. I'll never speak to you again. But every time I thought, if I do this out of bitterness or unforgiveness or anger, then I'm going to be perpetuating the very cycles that I'm trying to
Mhm.
break. And so I've got to do it from a place of spiritual wholeness and wellness, and knowing that God is giving me the permission to walk away. And so that's what happened when Caroline was sick. I just knew, and I talk about the exact situation in the book, but I thought, this is it. I'm done. And it was almost because the interaction with my mom, she even said, if this is the end of our relationship, so be it. And something about her voicing that gave me the permission I needed to walk through that door.
Mhm.
But here's what I will say. When I look at honor your father and mother, the best way for me to honor my mother in that time was to exit from that relationship, because what it had turned into was so toxic and so volatile and not great for either one of us, not for our mental health, not for our emotional health, not for our spiritual health. And sometimes the best way you can honor somebody is to say, I bless you, I forgive
Mhm.
you, but I cannot be part of this relationship anymore. And what I will say, it was 14 years from the time I walked away until my mom passed away. And what I say is that 14 years allowed me to continue to, and even with the release of this book and writing this book and going to therapy after writing this book, it's continued to help me release her and any bitterness or anything that I think, had I tried to stay engaged with her for those years, it would have just gotten worse and worse. But it's allowed me to have a grace for her and an empathy for her and what all she was struggling with that I wouldn't have had if I had tried to stay there.
I understand. It was very well said, and I 100% agree with you. I had the opportunity to tell my biological father, have forgiven you for what you had did to me in my
Mm-hmm.
childhood. I am no longer angry, but I don't necessarily want a relationship.
Yeah.
And so that's that forgiveness. That's like God
Mm-hmm.
allowing me to close that door. And
Yeah.
Melanie, it's one of those things, and I think you talk about it too. You think about, what if my dad passed away and I
Mm-hmm.
don't talk to him again? Am I going to be okay? I'm not going to know until that day comes. And the end of my story is not over yet. That's something that you have to be prayerful through of,
For sure. Yeah.
God,
And you have
I'm letting this go.
And you have to know. And that was it. And I knew. And I did have the chance, and I write about it in the book, where I did see my mom one last time before she passed away. But I walked away from that knowing I may never have that chance. This is me
Mhm.
saying that this is the end of this relationship. You do have to kind of make your peace with that. And I think that that's where, to me, it becomes so important to do it with forgiveness and grace in your heart. Because I think if you do it out of bitterness and anger, then I think that ends up eating you alive. And the thing about making the decision to do that, and you know it because you've done it, and your situation is more extreme than mine in that way, but I think you never feel good about it's not it's what needed to happen, but you're never like, oh, so I don't speak to my mom, that feels great. Like
No.
it's not a relationship that's
No.
meant to be severed lightly.
Yeah.
So you've got to have your own peace with it, because there are enough times that you're going to question and wrestle with it, because it's not the way it's supposed to be.
That's right. And doubt will come in, and that's why we have
Mhm.
counseling, and that's why we have
I
prayer.
think
I love, and this is for the person, that's going to pick up your beautiful book and read this, the end, especially too. God gives you such beautiful grace in that ending as well, of how
Mhm.
he showed up in those moments with your sister and your mom. Like I
Mhm.
said, I've read your book. I get emotional right now with tears just on the pages because
Mm.
it's authentic. It's hard. It's real, but you always point back to God.
Mhm.
And over again, God shows up with your daughter, with your husband, and your relationships, even in your
Yeah.
relationship with your mom. And it's not easy, Melanie. And I can't imagine how hard it was to write your book. But I want to say thank you for doing the hard work of putting it on paper and letting God guide you through it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. And that is, it's funny because as you write a book, you don't know all the ways that God is going to use it. And it's like
Right.
everything else in your life where you're like, I trust you with it. But, my prayer is that other people would see themselves in the pages of this story, because I feel like it's something that people don't talk about a lot in Christian circles. What does it look like when you have a parent who doesn't love you or can't love you or isn't healthy? And so my hope is that people find healing and encouragement and just some peace for themselves. It's funny because even this morning, we're recording this on a Sunday, but even this morning in church, we sang the song where all your promises are yes and amen. And I thought, man, that is the truest thing, where it's like there are hard things and hard situations, and life still comes at you fast. And, just when you think you've slayed these dragons, there are more dragons. But I thought, that's why I wanted this book to ultimately always point back to none of this would have been possible without the grace of God in my life, because he is the ultimate healer, and he
Mhm.
is the one that gives us beauty for ashes, and that all his promises, even when the story doesn't look like we wished it had or could have been or whatever, that his promises are true. I believe that to the depths of my being.
And I see it. And I was telling somebody, I was like, I love your writing because you don't pick this book up and see like a big old cross.
Yeah.
It's not like God's going to slap you in the face like it's a dragon. It's beautiful. And you
Yeah.
don't really know it's going to be about God's redemption until you start getting into the story. I
Mm-hmm.
like that too because it sort of
Thank
sneaks up
you.
on you. And so many of my friends, Allison and Abby, and so many are like, please tell Melanie how much this book has meant to them
Oh,
because they have their own. We all have our, like you said so nicely in your book, we are people and we are flawed, and those
yeah,
relationships are going to be hard.
they
Is
are.
there any last things that you would like to say to the person listening that may be going through their own trauma with
Mm-hmm.
parents and raising their own kids that are having a hard time in these high school, middle school years?
I think to me, the biggest thing is whatever you are going through in your life, whatever you see your child going through, is just trust that God is going to use even that hard thing. And I think as parents, one of the things that God kept impressing on me, and this was even past Caroline's high school life. This was kind of when she was going through some hard stuff in college. And I just kept wanting to, you want to take care of them. You want to put them in bubble wrap. You don't want them to hurt. And God so clearly said to me, I can't be her savior if you keep trying to be her savior.
Mm.
And as parents, especially our kids, because I've even told Caroline, I'm like, you grew up in this home with these two parents who love and adore you. Like, you've gotten to grow up in this home that is loving and affirming, and we think you're the greatest thing ever. So God had to forge character in you in different ways. Those things are going to come, but trust what God is doing in your life. Trust what God is doing in your child's life, even if it's hard, even if it's not what you wanted, because he's always writing a better story. I really do see, I can look back at everything Caroline's gone through. I can look at every hard time I've gone through. And as much as we hate it, all of us, if we're honest, can go, oh, that was when my faith grew the most. That's when I saw how big God really is. That's how I learned to trust him more. And, it's funny because with that perspective, that should make us, it's like in the Bible, like, do not be afraid of this fiery ordeal. But then when the fiery ordeal comes, we're like, this is the worst. This is terrible. I mean, Caroline and I always laugh because I'm like, character building is the worst. I hate it. Like, I would so much rather, but it's the truth. It's the hard times that really test you and bring out who God is in your life and what he can do through you. So I would just say, trust him in that, even when it seems hard and even when you can't see the clear path out, because that's usually how it is until you're on the other side. And then you're like, oh, he was always doing this. I couldn't see it. And I think one of the verses I've held on to so much over the last year is like, forget the former things. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? And I thought, as humans, most of the time when God is doing a new thing, we do not perceive it. We don't see it, because so many times we want it to look this way, and that's not how it's going to look. But he's always doing a new thing.
Yeah. We are hanging on for dear life in the middle of it.
Listen, we are. Jesus, take the wheel, but I'm not always going to like it.
That's right. Oh, Melanie, I can't thank you enough for your time and for sharing and for your beautiful book yet again. So thank you so much for today.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. Love talking to you.
You're welcome. So full disclosure, Melanie and I had some Wi-Fi issues while we were recording, but she was a total trooper and just hung in there with me. Her story is hard and powerful. I'm going to read right out of Here Be Dragons. If I truly want to break this generational cycle that perpetuated a mean girl culture, I had to fully feel the pain of it and give myself space to heal. Being free of Suzanne was finally allowing the deepest parts of me to become whole. I accept that she was most likely never going to change, and it wasn't my job to try to make her do so. I was able to concentrate on Caroline and my family without having to constantly navigate everything with my mom. I was living out Isaiah 44:3. Pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. Navigating a childhood wound with a parent, it's not easy. And as much as we want to heal those relationships, as much as we want to honor our parents and fix everything, sometimes that's not the end of our story. And maybe God is calling you to set up boundaries with your parent. Whatever that might look like, you have to be prayerful. You have to go before God and pray and lay that relationship down at his feet, and he will show you. It's not going to look like the same thing for every single person. But just like Melanie was talking about, you have to be able to forgive. And forgiveness doesn't mean that what the person did was okay. It doesn't mean having a relationship with the person either. It really means, God, I give you this heartache. I give you this situation. I give you this person, because we can't change the other person. We can only control ourselves and our own behavior. I would highly recommend to spend time in prayer if you need to go through counseling. I would like to pause and pray over you today, the person listening that might have a story that's similar, that knows the wounds of a mother or a father, and that's also navigating this crazy life of parenting, whatever age of kids you may have, that God would equip you to be the parents that child needs you to be. Father, I thank you so much for Melanie. I thank you for the gift that you've given her to be able to put her story on paper to minister. And God, I ask you, Father, that you would be with the person listening today that may know what it's like to have those parent wounds. God, you know their story, and I ask that you give them clarity, that you would give them visions, that you would speak to them even in their dreams, God, that they would know exactly the path that you have laid out for them in that relationship. If it's to put up boundaries, God, to know how to put those boundaries up and to lay that person at your feet, God, and that you would walk them through the journey of forgiveness and to take away the bitterness and the anger and the years of hurt. And God, that you would help the person that's going through their own trials with their children to give them wisdom of when do they stand up for their kid, when do they back off, that you would give them wisdom to know how to love and support their child through whatever they may be going through, and to know that their child is yours, and to know how to let go of control in certain situations. I thank you, God, that you are always with us, that you are always there to help us in different situations. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for continuing to support the Redeem podcast. Please follow the newsletter. You can hit the subscribe button or go to the link in the show notes to be able to go to the newsletter, where you will find more information about guests that I've had on in the past and continue to learn a little bit more about me and my family. You can always follow on social media. I will put all of Melanie's information in the show notes. If you have not read any of her books, I strongly recommend to start out with Here Be Dragons, and her other books are amazing as well. You can follow her on her podcast and in her website. I will put all of Melanie's information and her sweet daughter Caroline, her books. But I hope you know that you are loved, that God sees you in every part of your day, and He calls you healed, restored, and redeemed. Until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day.